Hello everyone. So now as a part of this lecture, under the course Western Political Thinkers, we'll be covering Unit 4, that is Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, and focusing on his concept of Geist. The outline of this module is that we'll be focusing on the various ways or on the basic understanding of what Geist is, that is also known as spirit or the mind. By the end of this lecture, you shall be aware of his concept of Geist, which is indeed a very abstract one. So, Geist is a German word which is all the meanings of the English words such as spirit, mind, or soul. Hegel asks us to imagine that in the beginning, universe was totally empty. All that existed was the Geist or the mind. At this stage, the mind is without consciousness. It does have tremendous potential though. After this, it turns itself into the opposite, that is matter. Now, why does the mind basically turn to matter? It is because mind has a destiny which is for the mind to achieve self-understanding and therefore freedom. According to Hegel's concept of Geist, the goal of spirit is freedom. This freedom needs to be expressed and reflected in order to be really free. For him, organic life is basically a representation of progressively higher levels of complexity and rational organization that finally culminate in the emergence of humanity. It is with the emergence of human beings that mind, for the first time, achieves consciousness. But now it being only conscious, it is not yet self-aware, or there is no self-consciousness. And this entire process of self-consciousness is henceforth achieved over the course of human history. That is wherein we see the Hegel's philosophy of history, where he talks about how the self-consciousness of one or the idea of self is then differentiated into the idea of a group, and then we see the entire formation of the state happening. According to Hegel, the goal of spirit is freedom. This freedom needs to be expressed and reflected in order to be really free. At this stage, consciousness understands that individuals are bound to other individuals in a single communal consciousness or culture. Spirit being the self-consciousness of the entire community now, the whole of which the individuals are only a part. As the consciousness of the spirit unfolds and changes, so do the values and actions of individual parts of which it is made. So for Hegel, the philosophy of spirit or mind can be divided into three different divisions. One being the subjective spirit, that is in relation to self, in form of self, followed by objective spirit, which is in form of reality once the self-consciousness attains the part of group consciousness, followed by the final stage, that is absolute spirit, which is absolute truth or absolute freedom. He describes the three stages of spirit-mind that begin with the subjective spirit of individual people, moving on to the objective spirit that emerges within the group consciousness of human communities, particularly in the shape of laws, morality, and social ethics of that particular group or of that society, which then finally culminates into its final stage, that is the absolute spirit, which goes on to emerge in forms of various human social expressions, that is art, religion, and philosophy. On the spirit's developmental path to maturity, it is generally motivated through the passions and natural impulses of individual people, something that he has asked us to classify as the subjective spirit. Such human passions often result in suffering with no clear good coming from it. But this is only the initial step of the spirit's development. And as more steps are taken, further development takes place, the aim of the spirit finally starts becoming much clearer. The next step is the development of the laws of the state, which is your objective spirit. But even here, there are many conflicts through its political history, and it may still not be immediately clear what the spirit's aim is. So finally, when you have the absolute spirit stage, that is, which is the highest state of spirit that develops first from individual, that is your subjective spirit, then from the laws and morality which are created by the states, which is objective spirit. This emergence of absolute spirit finally happens in the highest forms of culture that the human societies are created around, specifically in its dimensions of philosophy, art, religion, and history. Basically, Hegel says that consciousness is complete when it reaches the philosophical stage. So for Hegel, subjective spirit becomes a potential force. So being a self-consciousness or being a single individual consciousness, it is the potential that we are looking at. After that, it goes on to the next stage, that is the objective spirit, which is the force being in action now. So now this potential force has finally culminated into the newer steps which are formulating under actions, which finally takes you to the final attainment of freedom, that is the absolute spirit, which is the main goal of the mind. So this being the final target of the potential force that we see in the subjective spirit is the final realization of its attainment of freedom. For any other elaboration, you can refer to Subrata Mukherjee, Sushila Ramaswamy's History of Political Thought or Shefali Jha's Western Political Thought from Plato to Marx. Thank you.